Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it. And thank you for inviting me to come speak to your group. I'm really excited to be here and share our story, our fishers and farmers story. Ag and natural resources leaders came together in 2008 and 2009 to form Fishers and Farmers Partnership to take an approach of an environment of mutual respect that cultures and takes advantage of the expertise and knowledge of both groups. You can see a picture of our steering committee there up at the Dubuque, the National River Museum. And then also you can see what our last steering committee meeting up in Minnesota there down in the lower right-hand corner. Meet our leadership team. We believe in a balance of both agriculture and natural resources, and we believe that's important so that you can hear, both aspects of different projects that are going on the ground. Our co-chairs are Terry Spence, who's a grass-fed beef producer in Missouri, and Sherry Fisher, who is the Stream and Watershed Unit Supervisor in Missouri Department of Conservation. We have our co-chair positions rotate around the 5 states in the upper Mississippi River Basin. And Sherry has been a steering committee member since 2013. You also see Amy Smith, who co-coordinates with me, and she leads our communications team. She is with the Habitat for Humanity here in La Crosse. And Jody Whittier is our science team lead, and she's out of the University of Missouri. And in the middle, you can see our steering committee there, hard at it, trying to decide which projects to fund in the upper Mississippi River Basin. Fishers and Farmers overlaps with the Midwest Glacial Lakes, and we are one of 20 fish habitat partnerships guided under the National Fish Habitat Partnership, which was a program originally under the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Fisheries Program, and NFHAP is authorized at $7.2 million annually. And we became fully recognized, as Joe said, in March of 2010. We focus on rivers, streams, and watersheds, and most often cool and warm water streams. And we have been really successful by putting farmers in the lead and working with farmer-led committees. It's not hard to understand why there is such a need for Fishers and Farmers Partnership. We face many challenges like the Midwest Glacial Lakes Partnership, such as land use changes, sediment, and nutrient issues. But we also have a lot of other agricultural impacts. We don't have a large budget each year, usually only around $200,000 to $300,000, and it is competitive. But we are able to leverage funding on both of our projects and much larger ones or initiatives that our partners are working on. Sometimes we just see ourselves as a catalyst to bring more excitement or energy or resources to something that our partners have already started. And we received about $1.9 million since 2009 and have matched it with federal, state, and local funds. And we have worked on approximately 63 projects. We are still working on uploading our newest projects to our website, but you can find all of our projects at fishersandfarmers.org. And although Nancy North has been probably our most welcoming Fishers and Farmers member, she was our communications lead since the beginning. She has invited all of us since 2009 to get out of our comfort zones. And you'll see there in the middle of the screen our leaders that started Fishers and Farmers Partnership. And while we were forming, Nancy toured the Mississippi River Basin, interviewing producers and agricultural experts about what they thought was impacting farm management decisions and conservation actions. She also heard what was lacking in many of the state and federal programs and funding. So Fishers and Farmers started forming their strategic plan around these ideas. They decided that to have successful fish habitat, that they themselves had to get out of their comfort zones and work to put innovative farmers in the lead. Starting out, we were mostly ag and just fish biologists. However, over the years, we've been bringing in foresters, GIS and marketing specialists, as well as social scientists and watershed specialists. We have farmers and ranchers, crop consultants, and we decided we really need to open the gates and reach across programs and agencies more. And it seems like no matter how much we do it, we need to do even more. Our steering committee works together to decide which fish habitat projects to fund, both in-stream and terrestrial, to receive funding. We work across state lines to bring in more flexible funding, technical assistance, and watershed leaders. We try to think about the whole project, starting in stream and then the stream banks and looking at the riparian corridor, the floodplain, and then into the upland. This project is in Southeast Missouri, and it's working on all of those things, working on stream bank stabilization, planting trees in the riparian corridor, and prairie grasses in the pasture. The farmers there have fenced cattle out of the stream and have provided alternate water sources. This is a Fishers and Farmers terrestrial site visit that we just completed last year. And meet Rob Pulliam. He recently retired from the Missouri Department of Conservation and now works for the Nature Conservancy. He's there in the blue on the left. It's important to find people who have a desire and the skills to connect with landowners. Many of us call these soft skills. It's important to recognize that not all people have these, not even sometimes agency conservationists that we work with. I once had a county employee tell me, I can't go knocking on doors. We wait for farmers to come to us. And Fishers and Farmers is saying you may not have to knock on doors if you use conservation marketing, as Rob Pulliam calls it. It is networking and building trust, such as visiting coffee shops, talking to the farmers, really getting out there in the community and getting to know and work with members there. When speaking with farmers and ranchers, Rob inserts conservation into a business model that they can understand. Now farmers come knocking on Rob's door with conservation projects that they want to do. Because of his networking, Rob has helped initiate 2 farmer-led committees in Missouri. And this is our steering committee doing the aquatic site visit on the same project that you saw in the screen before. We really like to view both sides. And so we had Abigail Lambert, who is from Ozark Land Trust in Missouri, help lead us on our canoe trip on the stream. And it was really interesting because our stream experts have been able to point out many of the different issues on the stream to the farmers in our steering committee and the farmers in our projects. And sometimes these really have, we really have some interesting conversations. And we need to get in the same boat and row. This is our steering committee on the Mississippi River down near Hannibal, Missouri. Here are the steering committee organizations we've worked with in the 5 states over the years. We're made up of federal, state, county, and non-government organizations in natural resources and agriculture. Some of the groups include the Iowa Soybean Association or the Minnesota Corn Growers. We have 16 active steering committee members and are transitioning a couple of more. New organizations send in petitions to join, and our steering committee votes by consensus. We usually require a 2-year term, but really don't have a length on the limit. So one of our members, Jack Lauer, Minnesota DNR, has been with us for approximately 15 years. And you'll be seeing Jack throughout the presentation. Our priorities include working with several farmers on our projects through social and dirt moving projects. And we work to bring in more resources that might not be there so that we can accomplish more for our farms and our fish. Fishers and Farmers puts farmers in the lead to address the root causes of fish habitat deterioration. This is the first landowner committee that we worked with approximately 15 years ago in a watershed southwest of St. Louis, Missouri. I like to think that it's kind of similar to our lake associations in that neighbors are coming together for a purpose to protect important resources. Fishers and Farmers helped fund this rotational grazing demonstration project started by Bob and Nikki Baker, pictured in the front row there. This blossomed into other farms joining in and farmers, including Dave Dunn, who is down there in the right-hand side, who put alternative water source on his farm so his cattle would not lounge in the stream anymore. And Fishers and Farmers looking for innovative farmers like the Bakers, and they worked to help get the cattle out of their streams. So you can see the shade tent there. In the streams in many areas in Missouri, those river riparian corridors have trees, which provides shade for the cattle. And so this was a new way of providing shade for cattle. Although now you see them all over the landscape here in the Mississippi River Basin, but at the time it seemed pretty new. And thanks to the biologist Kenda Flores, who worked for Department of Conservation, Missouri Department of Conservation, and Rob Pulliam, and they both initiated this work simply by meeting with farmers in coffee shops. And the National Fish Habitat Partnership took notice of their work. In April 2010, at the NIFHAP Jim Range National Casting Call in Washington, D.C., they presented an award to the Bakers and Kenda Flores. And it was a really cool opportunity for me. This is my first experience with Fishers and Farmers. I got to go and watch them accept the award. A couple of you may recognize Scott Robinson, who was with the Southeast Aquatics Resource Partnership, or SARP, also received an award that same year. He's there on the left-hand side. So we've learned over the years that peers are among the most powerful influencers of social change. And really, change can only happen at the speed of earned trust. When when a respected landowner makes a shift on the land, then others seem to follow. John Schurter there in the red jacket, who is a Missouri farmer, said, "I don't want to work with you people." And he didn't trust the government. I can't imagine why. And so Chris Williamson, who was a fish biologist from Missouri Department of Conservation, worked to earn John's trust. And he ended up doing a Fishers and Farmers project on his farm. And this was on Pinot Creek in Missouri. And the Pinot was known for smallmouth bass and other sport fish, as well as freshwater mussels. They installed a paddock or a rotational grazing system, cover crops, and initiated a farmer-led group. A few years later, John and his wife attended 3 of our Fishers and Farmers workshops, which you'll hear more about later. And they even hosted one of them on their farm. They helped inspire other farmers to come together in a landowner council. And in 2019, they received the Leopold Conservation Award from Sand County, which is an awesome organization out of Wisconsin. And if there's time at the end today, I hope to show the 3-minute video. And if not, we'll post it in the chat. So where do you start? This is so overwhelming at times. We have people scratching their heads and saying, this is such a big landscape. Where do we start? So we decided with Fishers and Farmers that we're trying to empower landowners with resources. So we have resources on our website. We do demonstration projects on the ground. We just want to take baby steps, like just start something. And we found when we do that, then the neighbors take notice and they come over and take a look. And at first they're really hesitant, which, I totally understand. And so, little by little, we have seen these things grow. And if you take a look at a resource, we even have some fish passage information for those of you that are fish managers. And we are working with a barrier prioritization with the Southeast Aquatics Resource Partnership, or SARP. So we're really excited to move into that in the future here. Our communications team is also working with the University of Wisconsin Extension and the North Central Region Water Network, which is a 12-state land grant college and university organization. And it's one of the programs is called the Confluence for Watershed Leaders. and we provide training, learning, and resources for landowners. So it's really cool that Fishers and Farmers, we're extending beyond the upper Mississippi River Basin. We're trying to also work with other states outside of the watershed. After presenting at a lake meeting, farmer John Aaron walked up to lakeshore owner Rick Georgeson and said, "You bring lake people to my farm and I'll bring farmers to your lakes." And John Aaron says that the lake group has given money for a no-till drill and a roller crimper to be rented and used by farmers for trials. And then also the lake property owners have also tested their properties around the lake for phosphorus. And from there, we've seen a relationship grow. And Fishers and Farmers has presented at the Mill Creek meetings with their stream table and have loaned out our rainfall simulator. And it's really cool because John's also all excited about educating non-farmers, including he presented with me at UW Stevens Point at an American Fisheries Society meeting, and he hosts annual field days on his farm for the local schools. And it's really not a surprise to anyone that John and Melissa received the Leopold Conservation Award from the Sand County Foundation. And the stories of both John Schurter and John Aaron really inspired Fishers and Farmers. And with the help of Nancy North and Tracy Chaplin and funding from the AFWA, the American Fish and Wildlife Associations, and McKnight and other partners, we created the Watershed Leaders Network in 2015. It's a peer-to-peer learning and action network for agricultural landowners and their local neighbors and collaborators. Farmers come for a 2 to 3 day overnight meeting to share what they've done on their farms and in their communities. Our experts in front of the room are not scientists or biologists, they're farmers. And then we're really excited because the next one is August 19th to the 21st in Galena, Illinois. And at Watershed Leaders Network workshops, teams from 5 states look at barriers to their local work. They bring their varied expertise and viewpoints to the table to identify local next steps so that all watershed groups go home with an action plan. It's really fun to see that it's not one of your typical meetings where you go to the meeting and then you get back to your desk and you sit down and you say, now what? Farmers go back to their watersheds with an actual watershed plan, not an actual watershed plan, but steps, action plan steps to do on their farms and in their communities. And you can see John Aaron sharing his plan during one of our workshops in Dubuque, Iowa. And the farmers and the neighbors, knowing that they are part of a bigger effort, really gave the watershed leaders energy and purpose. And it's really motivating, focused work. And it's really fun to see the farmers and the watershed groups are going to each other's events, like you see here. This is the Galena River farmers and the Kickapoo farmers from Wisconsin, traveling to Stevens Point, Wisconsin, to Mill Creek. And also, Fishers and Farmers lends out their rainfall simulator and stream table to these watershed groups so that there's a hands-on learning and engagement of landowners. And it's really fun to see these tools kind of open the door for just more discussion and just gets kind of people a little bit out of their comfort zone so that they all come together and kind of learn and share. And it's really fun to see them really grow after going to a couple of these Watershed Leaders Network workshops. And the first year, we loaned out our equipment to 10 different watersheds, and we still are getting some requests every year for both our stream table and our rainfall simulator. Meet Beth Baranski on the left and Roger Reddington, who are from near Galena, Illinois. Beth attended the first Watershed Leaders Network in August of 2016, and then went back home and asked Roger, a local farmer, if he wanted to attend the next one. Roger attended the next one in 2017, went back home and brought more farmers to the next Watershed Leaders Network. It was during these workshops that farmers decided to start a landowner committee. The group created a name, Joe Davies County Soil and Water Health Coalition. And the really cool thing is they started having a lot of field events. They had up to 17 in one year. And they won the Nutrient Sensor Action Challenge Award from the EPA in 2018. Their committee, which has grown to over 12 active farmers, are having monthly meetings, and they even had them during the pandemic. And it was really fun to see and hear that the farmers learned how to use Zoom and PowerPoint and record videos. And so they hosted a virtual field day because they didn't want the pandemic to slow down their work. And the really exciting thing is they're going to be hosting the next Watershed Leaders Network workshop. So Fishers and Farmers has been trying to connect a lot of these watershed groups across the basin. And this is an old map. We're going to be updating it here. But at least you can get an idea of there's so many watershed groups, and we keep learning about new ones all the time. And the ones that we work with the most are listed there on the right and left-hand sides of your screen. And we're really excited to just try to provide, connection for these different groups on our website and through the different networks that we work with. And it's really cool to see that Wisconsin is funding producer-led groups or farmer-led groups. And we really hope to see more of our states do this. Our state reps are not all fish chiefs in the Fishers and Farmers Partnership. And leadership is really an activity, not a position. And pretty much anyone, anywhere can lead. Don't think that you can't lead because you aren't in a certain position. Our farmers and landowners are really leading locally. People at higher levels may have more strings to pull, but if you don't have people on the ground, you really don't have. This is Jack Lauer, and he has been a member since 2008, 2009, and has been reaching out to watershed groups, attending a lot of field days and initiating farmer workshops. One was near Mankato. And he presents at a lot of different state and regional meetings. His work shows, and you can ask some of our steering committee members what state usually has the most projects come in. So I encourage you to reach out to your neighbors. I know a lot of you already are. Reach out to your counties, your NGOs, and engage unusual voices. We always forget that there's somebody else. There's always somebody else out there that we haven't reached out to. And Fishers and Farmers, we need to do it more, especially with some of our tribal partners and other groups that we haven't thought of. We recently funded Friends of the Upper Mississippi River to work on an oak savanna and fish habitat project with local fishers and farmers. And they are located in the Vermilion watershed, just south of St. Paul, Minneapolis. Our steering committee just toured the site and learned about the work of the Friends Group, Minnesota DNR, and the Hmong American Farmers Association. And they work on community-supported agriculture program. They donate to local food shelves, and they sell to farmers markets and organizations in the nearby cities. And we've been telling our story in new ways in Fishers and Farmers. Besides journal articles, fish habitat assessments, maps and signs, we've been getting articles in natural resource and agricultural publications. Some of the highlighted ones are Missouri Beef Cattleman and John Deere. And then there's also been several state natural resource magazines. Thanks to Midwest Glacial Lakes Partnership and AFWA, we hired a writer to help write a lot of these stories that can be found on our website. and we're still working to get more in magazines. And we've really found that when farmers lead, farmers respond. And thanks to the Water Resources Center in Mankato, this ravine workshop was really successful. We had over 180 farmers attend. And over again, we heard from the farmers that the best presentation of the day was Jack Herrick's, who's a Wisconsin farmer near Cashton, Wisconsin. And he worked on ravine stabilization on his own farm. So if we're going to improve fish habitat and water quality, we can't put a Band-Aid on the situation or the problem. And so we really want to get at the root of the problem. And we want to put roots in the soil so that we can improve the soil health and our fields become sponges. And that'll help improve both the streams and the fish habitat. And you can see our projects that we have funded over the years are on this slide. And they're both non-dirt moving and dirt moving. And Fishers and Farmers is really, really serious about this. We're really interested in also talking about soil health. And you have, fish biologists talking about soil health. And some of them have to really scratch their head and think about the days that they were doing their undergrad programs. And it takes them back to when they had their soil health classes. And, oh yeah, I remember that. But they really get it. They see the benefits of tackling this from all different sides, not just trying to figure out how we as fish managers go at the problem. It's all of us together. It takes a community. And according to NOAA, there were 28 disasters in 2022. And so, that was they spent $92.9 billion in disaster assistance. And I know we can't, do a lot at one time, but we can take baby steps and we can work on things at the local community level with our local farmers and our neighbors. And our project goal is really that, just take baby steps. Like, let's look at, the whole project, not just what's in the stream, but let's look what's on the landscape and all around. And let's collaborate. Let's look at adaptable funding and really go after and try to grow those relationships and really work on trust. And we've seen a lot of growth in the Cannon watershed in Minnesota. This is one of our projects that we've been funding for quite a few years now. And we've been working with Al Kraus from Clean River Partners. And he has been working also with the St. Olaf students who have been taking water quality samples across the watershed. And so that's been really fun to get the local students involved, talking to farmers. And so they've been taking tile samples and talking to farmers and getting involved. We've been having field days where we bring our stream table and we talk about different impacts to streams and fish. And since 2018, about a dozen farmers in Rice Creek have been planting cover crops on about 1,000 acres, or 30% of the tillable farmland in this 4,100 acre watershed. And so starting out, this project really was looking at cover crops, improving the soil health. But since then, they've been looking at providing, they just applied for funding for an easement project. And they've been talking about in the future, looking at maybe a fish passage project. So it's been really fun to just see this growth that started out, pretty small, and it's been growing and it's been multiplying. And with Al Kraus and working with Clean River Partners, they're also working on the watersheds next to them as well. We worked with Valley Stewardship Network on providing funding for watershed councils. And we helped fund the Tanner Creek Farmer-Led Watershed Council in 2016. And since then, we've helped fund about 5 of them. And we've been providing all sorts of resources, providing different things for their field days and meetings, and just trying to figure out how we can accomplish more together and how we can get our neighbors involved. And Fishers and Farmers toured the Prairie Strips project at the Neil Smith National Wildlife Refuge quite a few years ago. And this project was initiated by Iowa State. And we were wondering why we didn't see more of these projects in Wisconsin and Minnesota. So we reached out to Valley Stewardship Network and the Minnesota Department of Ag and Malheur County and said, why aren't we funding these projects? And so they worked to put proposals together, and now we're funding prairie strips in not just in Iowa, but also Wisconsin and Minnesota as well. And these resources you can also find on our website. And we found too in Fishers and Farmers that we really need to support consistent project managers to help farmers. Sometimes it's not always funding that different watershed groups need. Sometimes it's just having that consistent person that is there helping and guiding. And Steve Sodeman, who is on our steering committee, calls these people, these project managers, conservation consultants. And I kind of like his term. And most often they're non-government organizations, but not always. Sometimes they're local agency folks, county or even state. And once in a great while, even federal organizations. And this is Kevin Keener, who's working on the Root River Field to Stream project, and you can see a link there. And I highly recommend you looking at some of Kevin and Ron Miner's work. It was really inspirational, the way that Ron Miners has gotten out and has walked the fields with so many farmers. He works with the agricultural conservation planning framework tool, and he brings maps to farmers, and they talk about different projects, and they've found that a lot of these farmers have turned around and have done these projects on their own, sometimes without asking for financial assistance. So this is one of the really fun success projects that we've seen in the Upper Mississippi River Basin. Another fun project that we love to work on are the oxbow restoration projects in the Boone River watershed in central Iowa. And Fishers and Farmers funded the first oxbow restoration in 2010 with Iowa Department of Natural Resources. And then we started working with the Nature Conservancy. And Karen Wilkie has just been a force. It's been amazing to see all of the work that's going on the ground and all of the oxbows that they've been restoring there in the Boone River watershed. And these oxbows are really a win-win because you're not taking land out of production. It's you're filtering the nitrate out of the water and also providing habitat to a federally listed species called the Topeka shiner. And so we are also seeing waterfowl use these oxbow, and you're providing floodplain storage. And so we're really excited that all this work has created on the ground, and all the people that have really stepped up. And Karen even wrote an RCPP grant, and so now they're going full force and doing oxbow restoration across the Boone River watershed with many different partners. And we also work on Lowhead Dam removals, and we haven't done a lot of these projects, but moving forward, we'd love to see some of this work, especially working with farmers. And this one, we worked with Mitchell County in Iowa. So when COVID hit, our Watershed Leader Network workshops were shut down, and our partnership got together to decide, well, how can we still be strategic? How can we reach out in a new way? So Jack Lauer from Minnesota said, well, why aren't we interviewing more farmers to tell their story? So everyone decided that'd be a great idea. So Nancy started doing live webinars on the third Thursday of every month. And she also started a radio program on the third Saturday. And those were hosted by Pam Yankee. And she's known as the farm babe in Wisconsin. And these radio shows, they kept going for a long time and they were pretty successful, and we turned those into podcasts. And we kind of ran out of funding for them, but you can still find all those podcasts on our website. So we encourage you to go back and listen to some of those, because a lot of them have our farmer-led groups that we work with. They tell their own story, and it's really inspirational. And so we've done a lot of these webinars, radio talk shows, and I think it's really helped, inspire people, and have, I've seen a lot more people come to the table and really say, how can we do even more? So it's been really fun for the steering committee members to see, that we just started with baby steps and it's really grown. So our webinars were called Boots on the Ground. We also had our radio talk show was called Neighbor to Neighbor. And those were partly funded by TJ Cardis with the Saddle Butte Egg. And they, like I said, can all be found on our website. And we also have other unique programs in Fishers and Farmers besides the podcasts, and we have field days and digital events and different workshops. We're always trying to reach out in different ways. We're always fishing for new answers and trying to meet different people that we haven't thought of before. And so that was one thing. If you can, in the chat, I would love to see where all of you work. If you can write in the chat your name and, maybe the Lake Association. I know a lot of you work with lakes, the different lake association you work with, or maybe some of you are working on the landscape. Is there a farmer-led group that you work with or want to work with? I would love to see some of your work. So I encourage you to type that into the chat, reach out, and if there's not time today, please feel free to reach out to me. You can reach us on our website, fishersandfarmers.org, and we have different groups can sign up for our newsletter or just to connect and talk about our work and share some of our experiences. And one of the things we are excited too is we're thinking about the next generation FFA in schools. And when I was in school, it was called Future Farmers of America. And now I'm told by my girls, who are both both of them are in the local chapter, it's called Food for America. And so I encourage you to reach out to some of these schools, because we're losing a lot of these programs across our states, whether it's funding or different things. And I know when I was in school, our FFA had fisheries and wildlife classes, and I don't know that all of our schools have those, but I think it's really important to keep those in our schools, because students go home and have discussions with their parents. And I know both of my girls come home and we talk about some of these different things. And the other thing is reach out to your local rod and gun clubs. This is an organization every year with our local Bangor Rod and Gun, we have the fifth graders walk down from the local elementary school, and we have a fishing day. And it's really fun to see years down the road when these students reach out to me and they want to do a job shadow. So we've sent out surveys after our workshops, and this response really stood out to me. And it kind of triggered me into trying to think outside the box a little bit more. And the quote is, "I've noticed a real difference in ideas or optimism depending on how closely staff work directly with landowners and particularly ag producers. The dreamers need to get better understanding of the real challenges, and the pessimists need to be inspired and build more networks, connections, resources, and ideas." And I don't know, Joe, do we have time for the video?
Yes, we do.
All right, I'm going to play our Watershed Leaders Network workshop video, and hopefully we'll have a few minutes at the end to have some questions and answers. Thank you.
Since the beginning of time, where things failed, they destroyed their soil. They just, they worked their soil to death, and if you don't have soil, you're not going to sustain life.
The foundation of all society is good soil and clean water. And if we don't have that, how do we feed a world?
We need to protect the Mississippi River Basin. It affects hundreds and thousands of people throughout the watershed, and so it's not just about what's happening in the water, it's about what's happening on the landscape that ultimately affects the water.
If we want resilient farms and fishable streams, we have to work together.
We need to learn and connect with each other, and we just didn't know how. I'm a trained biologist. Farmers relate to that same biology, but their training is how to grow crops. You take different people and they don't always mesh together. And so this is allowing us to mesh in a way that helps us all come together.
When I came to my first workshop in 2016, I had no idea what a farmer-led group was. But after that, we formed our own group, and we've been continuing to grow and to learn together about new ways to manage water resources in our area.
I keep coming back for the learning and the connections, sharing ideas on how to do conservation differently and working across sectors and across jurisdictions.
When we gather as people who care about land and water to talk about issues that really matter to us, we pretty quickly discover that we're smarter, more innovative, and more resourceful together. By sharing stories and asking really good questions, more becomes possible together than anyone could do alone.
The land and the soil, that's my livelihood. My children and grandchildren are going to be on this land when I'm gone. I want it to be just as good for them as it was for me when I got it.
All right, sign me up, Heidi. I am motivated. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. That was just really wonderful, and there's so many cool examples of the work that Fishers and Farmers has been doing. I've got tons of questions. I could talk with you and chew your ear off all afternoon about it. But I will mention to our audience, who I'm here to serve as the facilitator, that if you have questions for Heidi, please put them into the question and answer button. You can hover your mouse down along the bottom of the screen to the Q&A icon and submit your question there, and I will ask it of Heidi. So please go ahead and submit questions, and I'll answer them as they come in. Heidi, again, thank you for the presentation. I'll get started with my questions until I start seeing other folks ask theirs. So the first question is, you guys do so much cool stuff with building networks, with outreach, and with inspiring change. And those are notoriously, it's incredibly important and consequential work, but it's also notoriously difficult to quantify the benefits of what you're doing, in terms of how that changes the on the ground, water quality or soil health or whatever the objectives might be. So I guess I'm kind of curious how you guys as a partnership have looked to track and monitor your efforts, or how you think about how to spend your time on various activities as you allocate limited resources amongst your staff and time.
Yeah, it's a really good question. So, it comes down to the funders, right? They congressional staff, our federal funders, they want miles and acres, they want outputs, right? And not just in our federal program, but I'm sure other federal programs, other state programs. You want to see acres on the ground, you want to see miles on the ground, you want to see all these outputs and outcomes, right? And so how do you capture that? And so, that's really, really tough. And we struggle with that. We talk to soil scientists and try to get at that piece, because we do feel that this is so important. So some of the things we do is how many farmers we see coming to these meetings, how many more farmers are coming to these meetings, how many of the farmers are starting to put some of these practices on the ground, what kind of practices are they putting on the ground? And so we're trying to quantify that and trying to, some of that is people reaching out through our Facebook posts or our website posts or emails, and sometimes it's just listening to the farmer tell a story. And I think that is probably the most powerful piece. Like John Schurter's story. Like, to me, that's very empowering, I feel like, to other farmers. I know it's and fish biologists, we're introverts too. It's sometimes really hard to get out there and tell your story. But once you tell your story, I think you're gonna see other people say, well, I think I can do that, or I can try. And so I think it's really important that we keep trying. If we don't, even if we're not seeing all the miles and acres go on the ground right away, we're not going to see huge change immediately overnight. It's going to take years. It's going to take years to see some of this progress. And we're starting to see that in Missouri and some of our other areas, with the monitoring that these projects are doing. We are seeing in Rice, Rice Creek, they've been monitoring the water quality, and we are seeing some changes with the use of cover crops. And so I think the biggest thing is we need to lean on our science team leads, and so that they can help us tell our story, and our communications folks. And I think we're getting there in many different projects. But again, as you know, it's really hard to share, how you're making progress. But I really think by telling our stories, we're seeing that.
Yeah, it's compelling stuff for sure. And like you mentioned, the story of John, I mean, especially with the backstory that you gave us before the video that you just showed, how far, he came from not trusting the government to, being a spokesperson for the type of work. So I think that's really neat. We've got a question from the audience. How hard was it to get landowners into the oxbow work you talked about? And what benefits to landowners do you sell them to get on board? We recently heard of this work from Southwest Minnesota. This is somebody from South Dakota. And it's nice to hear it is happening in other areas. They're trying to learn more to see if they can get it going in eastern South Dakota.
Well, we rely heavily on our local partners. You can't, I'm one person and I'm trying to cover 5 states. As you know, Joe, it's a huge landscape, right? And so we really rely on our local partners. So Iowa Soybean Association has been amazing on doing this oxbow work. Number one, they have developed trust with the farmers and the landowners in those areas. And so Iowa Soybean actually helped Roger Wolf help start Fishers and Farmers from the very beginning. And since then, they have had someone in our steering committee the whole time. And so the biggest thing is trying to find those local people that they can trust. And so working with Iowa Soybean Association, also the private lands program and the Fish and Wildlife Service. We also have in Iowa, we have a private lands program working on oxbow restoration as well. And so having someone that lives there in the community or lives in that area really helps, because, you know, they see them out in the community and they develop trust, and it takes time. I'm not saying it's overnight, but just working to build that trust over time. And then the other thing is data, like showing the reduction of nutrients. We're working with universities. Iowa State is monitoring these oxbows, and so we're seeing reductions in nutrients and showing those results. And so farmers like data too. I'm not saying it's going to completely change their mind, but I'm saying if you have all the different partners coming together, it really helps a lot. And I don't think one partner can do it alone. I think it takes each partner to understand and come at it in a different direction. And so we've had really good success working with those local organizations, Nature Conservancy, Iowa Soybean, Partners Program, Fish and Wildlife Service.
One of the organizations that I don't think I heard you mention just in that list that you just shared was you know, Farm Bill programs, NRCS, and those sorts of, you know, FSA and conservation districts. And I guess I'm curious how you guys work with all of those, and, you know, there are state infrastructures that are stood up for NRCS, or all the local, often county-based conservation districts. So how do you guys have folks from them on your steering committee? Do you interact with them? How do you, it seems like you would be guiding people to use their services quite often.
Yep. Yeah. So we have had NRCS on our steering committee. Jimmy Bramblett, who was the state conservationist of Wisconsin, was on our steering committee. Oh gosh, it's been quite a few years ago already. He's moved on. But we probably work with NRCS more locally in our projects. Not to say we would love to have NRCS back on our steering committee. It's just sometimes it depends on if they are willing to step on or not. And so, you know, if there's folks on the call right now from NRCS, if you're interested in working, we do have an opening for another federal agency on our steering committee, and I can provide details later. But we do work with NRCS on the different project scale, at the project scale, and so we reach out to those local groups. For example, we just had a field day this last fall, and we helped present with NRCS at one of the local farmer groups on the Kickapoo watershed in Wisconsin. And it just depends. Every project is so different on what resources each of us provides. And so, like I said, in Iowa, in the Boone River watershed, we worked and did an RCPP grant with NRCS. In some of the other watersheds, you know, it's sometimes a little bit smaller, but in Missouri, they were the ones that actually showed us the rainfall simulator, and they did a demonstration back, you know, in, I think it was like maybe 2010. And then after that, I said, well, we need to get one in Fishers and Farmers. And so then when we went and purchased one. So, I mean, they are involved in different ways in different projects.
Thanks. And I'm going to post in the chat your contact information for folks that are still hanging on. So there's an email and then an invitation to reach out to you. And at this point, it's 2:58, and so I think we'll probably wrap up. Again, thank you, Heidi. Really incredible information. You guys are doing a ton of cool work. And so thank you for sharing it with us. And I do hope that it inspires folks across the MGLP to think about applying this in their areas to benefit their lakes. And if your area happens to be within the Fishers and Farmers footprint, then certainly reach out to Heidi and see if there's opportunities to collaborate that way. So, so thank you, Heidi.
Thanks, Joe.
Sure. We're going to wrap up. I did want to make a plug quickly for our webinar on the next one will be on April 23rd. So we're going to take a week off. And then we'll have a host of folks from Dr. Gretchen Hansen's lab presenting on quantifying the impacts of climate change on fish growth and production using the largest ever data set of Midwest glacial lake fisheries surveys to enable sustainable management. So they're leveraging a huge database that we've pulled together of fishes across the upper Midwest to look at how climate change might be affecting fish and might affect them in the future. Should be a pretty good one. So I recommend everybody sign in again in 2 weeks for that. Again, thank you, Heidi, and everyone have a great day.
Thank you very much.